We're in 2 Samuel chapter 15, and Absalom, who is David's son, steals the hearts of the men of Israel away from his father, King David, and we see David flee Jerusalem. That's where we are right here. King David has chosen to leave Jerusalem. He could have chosen to fight his son. David controls the army of Israel. But David didn't choose to fight his son. David chose to leave Israel, to leave his throne to his son Absalom, rather than to see his son come in and devour Jerusalem, to harm the great city of God, the city of Jerusalem. Instead of that, David leaves Jerusalem and leaves his throne. He also leaves 10 women behind. He's chosen 10 concubines, or what we'll call lower wives. He's chosen 10 of his harem to leave behind in his palace so they can upkeep the palace while he's gone. In David's head is always the thought, maybe God will show favor, maybe God will have mercy on me, maybe God will bring me back to the kingship, give me my royal throne again. I need to keep the palace in good shape. I'll leave the concubines. In 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 16, it says, so the king went out and all his household with him. They are leaving Jerusalem. They're being kicked out by David's son Absalom. But it says the king left 10 concubines to keep the house, the palace. The king's palace needed to be kept, so he kept 10 concubines behind. Now hold on to that. You think, okay, I get it. What's such a big deal? These 10 concubines will play a big part in Absalom's takeover of David's throne in just a minute. David had Gentiles that followed him out of Jerusalem, not just obedient Jews that wanted to follow the anointed king of Israel, but he also had Gentiles, people that are not ethnically Jewish. Let me say again, for anybody who has any fuzzy thought about the difference between a Gentile and a Jew, it's simply ethnic. It's 100% ethnic. It doesn't have to do with religion. It doesn't have to do with philosophy, theology. It's ethnic. You have people that are Hebrews. They are from the tribe, the family of Abraham. They can follow their ethnic family tree genealogy back to Abraham, his son Isaac, his son Jacob, and Jacob's 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. They are Hebrews. They're Jews. And if you're not in that family tree, you're a Gentile. Simple as that. It's simple ethnicity. You either are an ethnic Jew or you are not. And so David had ethnic Hebrews, his own people, his own blood, his own family, his own countrymen that followed him out of Jerusalem. I know Absalom is coming in to take the throne, but you are the king of Israel and we'll follow you wherever you go. But he also had Gentiles that went, non-Jews. And we meet a very important one here in 2 Samuel 15:21. Here's the man Ittai. And it says, but Ittai answered the king, and he said, as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely wherever my lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there also will your servant be. I'm following you, David. I'll follow you into death. I'll follow you into life. But what I won't do is leave you. Where you are, I am. I'm committed to you. I'm committed to your God. I'll follow you where you go. A hero of the faith. And then we move to this verse. We see the high priesthood. The priests, Zadok, and Abiathar come. There are 2 chief priests, 2 head chiefs, 2 high priests of Israel at this time, as Zadok and his family are taking over from Abiathar and his family. But the high priests come, and they have the Ark of the Covenant with them. If King David, the anointed of Yahweh, the chosen king of Israel, the great king who's been king for 35 years, if David is leaving Israel, then the worship of Yahweh will leave too. And David said, may it never be. I'm being exiled from Jerusalem, not Yahweh. You take Yahweh and his ark back into Jerusalem so the Jews can continue maintaining proper worship. Take the religious relic back into Jerusalem. And in verse 29 it says, therefore, at the words of their king, Zadok and Abiathar returned the ark of God, the ark of the covenant, to Jerusalem and remained there. This is not going to go well. And in verse 30, we start moving into the heart of David. It says, and David went up, as he's leaving Jerusalem, he went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and wept as he went up, and his head was covered, and he walked barefoot. I mean, this king was used to traveling around in regal majesty, not on this day. Not robes, not crowns, not scepters, not horses of victory or donkeys of peace to ride on. On this day he walks barefoot, his head is covered. He's in mourning for Israel, and he's in mourning for himself. He knows he's brought this on himself. Then all the people who were with him, both Jews and Gentiles that were in his entourage leaving, all the people who were with him each covered his head and went up weeping as they went. A quick map here. I hope you can understand what this is. It's a view from the top looking straight down. And I hope you can see, let me try to help you if I can. This right here, oh my goodness, this is working. This right here, can you see that? That is the city of Jerusalem. The old town of Jerusalem, the ancient border of the city of Jerusalem. Now, right beside it is the Temple Mount, obviously part of Jerusalem, but it also had its own name. What are some of the names God has given this particular point, this particular apex, this particular peak? Mount Zion, say it, Sarah. Mount Moriah in Abraham and Isaac's day. He calls it the mountain of God. All these things are this mount right here, on which the temple, which is right here in the middle, the building of the temple is built. So that is the city of Jerusalem here and the Temple Mount. Separating the city of Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives is this valley. You can't see it on this map. I'll show you a photograph in just a minute. But that valley is called the Kidron Valley. Kidron. The Kidron Valley. On the other side of the Kidron Valley, you see with this blue circle here, the peak there is the Mount of Olives. Now, the Bible says concerning the Mount of Olives that one day in the future, enemies of Israel, including people like Iran, will encircle the great city of Jerusalem and try to eradicate the Jews. So they will be all around Jerusalem. Jerusalem is like, I don't know if you've ever been to Seattle or any city like it, but Seattle is a city built up of hills. There's like 7 different hills that make up the city of Seattle. Jerusalem's much like that. You've got this hill, Mount Moriah. You've got the Mount of Olives. You've got this mount, this mount. There's little peaks all around it. They're not tall. We're not talking about Rocky Mountains. Picture more Texas Hill Country, because Jerusalem looks very, very much like the Texas Hill Country. Very, very much. We've never gone through the Texas Hill Country. When Amy and I both don't comment, man, this looks like the Judean hillside, because it does. That's what Jerusalem and the surrounding area looks like, the Texas Hill Country. And you know, from Llano, you got a hill here, hill here, hill here. You got all these little hills, exactly the same as we have here. So one day in the future, my point is, all the nations of the world will come, and they'll come around God's city, Jerusalem, and the feet, how do you like that foot? According to the book of Zechariah, Jesus Christ's feet will strike the Mount of Olives and split that mountain in half. And there will be a split from north and south, and there will be a river running through it as Jesus comes in to make war against all these nations, to destroy them and to save Jerusalem, his people who have called on the name of their Messiah finally. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That's Israel. Mount Moriah, the Kidron, Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, Mount Zion, the Kidron Valley. This that I've highlighted in blue here, this little thumb-looking thing sticking down, I don't know what that looks, almost like Italy, doesn't it? That's the city of David. If you've ever heard of the city of David, the city of David is not Jerusalem. The city of David is its own little isthmus that tails off of the city of Jerusalem. This is where David's palace was. This is where the Gihon Springs are. There's a lot of water that comes through here, some natural springs underneath. This is where David's palace would have been. So this arrow from left to right, right here, indicates the path, somewhat of the path that David is taking as he's leaving the city of Jerusalem. He's heading eastward toward the Mount of Olives, through the Kidron Valley. That's why it says, and David went up the ascent of the Kidron Valley. In this picture right here, this is not a photo. Well, this is a photograph of a model. You can see a human being standing here taking pictures of the model. But this is a fantastic model at a Hebrew museum in Israel. And here you see, right here, is the city of David. Jerusalem is over here. You see the difference? The city of David, and even though Jerusalem is often called the city of David technically is this little thumb, and you see the palace of the king. He would have gone down into the Kidron Valley and back up the other side. The Mount of Olives would be over here on the sidewalk somewhere. I just wanted to give you some idea of what this city looked like in reality. This is a bit of a video. Look at this. I wish I could stop it, but I don't think I can. You can see the wall there. All these ancient cities were walled in. This area right here would have been where the high priest lived. You see the extent of the city of Jerusalem. To give an idea, Jesus would have been buried or crucified back here in this corner. This red-roofed place is the Praetorium, the place where they'd have taken David. These high towers are the Fortadell, the fort or the citadel of David, the Tower of David. But it's a fantastic little model of what the ancient city of Jerusalem, and here you see it even better, and the city of David looked like. David was leaving the city of David, where his palace was, going eastward through the Kidron Valley, and now he's making an ascent up to the Mount of Olives. Just wanted to let you know where he is when this is going on. Verse 31, someone told David. So David's leaving and someone says, your friend Ahithophel, your counselor. Ahithophel is among the conspirators with your son Absalom. He's flipped. He's on the other side. And David responds with a prayer. What does David do on the worst day of his life? I mean, you got to gauge David's worst days of life. We all have a worst day when you can think back on something that occurred and think, that was it, man. That was the high water mark of despair in my life. That was a bad day. And here David, after 35 years of being king, walking out of Jerusalem because his own son is trying to steal the throne from him and has done it, I imagine this was one of David's worst days. And what does David do on one of his worst days? Prays to God. He prays to God. He doesn't forget God and get angry. He humbly sees the conspiracy going against him and he prays to God. David said in verse 31, O Yahweh, I pray, here's my request, make the counsel of my good friend Ahithophel, make the counsel of Ahithophel foolishness. So David, in a moment of despair, walking barefoot with a covered head, not walking as the king, but fleeing for the sake of the city of Jerusalem so that it's not destroyed, he prays to God, make Ahithophel's words unheeded. Now, why would David pray that? What do you think about Ahithophel? David says, make the counsel of Ahithophel foolishness. Why would David have to pray that if the counsel of Ahithophel wasn't good? If he wasn't a good counselor, David wouldn't have had to pray it. He's a fool. He's going to say something foolish. I hope Absalom follows his direction. But David knows this was one of my guys. We'll read in a few verses that when Ahithophel spoke, it was like the very voice of God speaking to Israel. He was a wise man that gave wise, godly counsel. And David knows it. And David knows this is a big hit. That the great thinker, the wise man of Israel, Ahithophel, is with my son, the conspirator Absalom. This is a huge problem for me. Father, I need you to make Ahithophel's counsel foolish, because otherwise it is brilliant. I showed you this verse last time. I'm just going to speed through it. I want you to see in all of this. Remember, last time I started telling you again that God isn't mad at David. God may be teaching David lessons, and there's no question he does, but he's not mad at him. This isn't out of spite or anger or a continued vengeance. They've made up. David has come to God in confession of sin. They've made up. Legally, there is no guilt in David's soul. God has taken David's confession. He's taken David's sin with Bathsheba and Uriah and separated it from David as far as the east is from the west. They are at peace. But sometimes there are consequences to certain sins that we commit. They don't just go away. So Yahweh isn't mad at David in continuing this punishment out of spite or hatred. He loves David and wants the best spiritual life possible for David. David, you're still an adulterer after all these years. You still can be tempted into murdering someone to cover up your foolishness. You've got to grow up, son. I'm going to put you through a series of tests and trials to continue your growth as a believer in God. I'm going to continue using you. God is not flushing David by kicking him out. He's teaching him, sharpening him, giving him opportunities to be dependent on God. Yahweh knows that David needs these events to transpire in his life to continue to grow him up spiritually. This is God at peace with David doing these things. Yahweh wants David's relationship with him to be intimate and meaningful. Same way he wants all of our relationships to be intimate with him and meaningful, useful, worthwhile. Don't misinterpret Yahweh's actions in David's life as anything other than justice and love intertwined. God told David, because of these things, the sword will never depart from your house, and I will allow evil to creep into your own household, and I'll take those 10 concubines that you left behind, and watch me do it, David. You slept with Bathsheba in the privacy of your own room, but I'm going to take your wife from you the way you took Uriah's wife from him, and I'm going to have your own son sleep with them in the public eye of all of Israel. It's punishment. He is a perfectly just God. Justice, fairness. The punishment fits the crime. So there are things that continue on even though me and God are at peace with each other. But there are fingers, it's like when you spill something and you see that water start or whatever you spilled start to spread out. You can't stop the spread of sin. There are ongoing consequences. That's what David is facing here that continue to spin off from David's sin of adultery and murder. But Yahweh has completely forgiven him. Do not forget that. He's not angry with David. He's at peace with his son David. He's completely forgiven David. He's reestablished their intimate walk with each other, and he's testing him and trying him through fire. It's the only way you grow up, David. I know you. If you were to choose to have, I just give you an example here, and it may be a poor one, but it's all I can think of. If you were to choose to have an adulterous affair, you might confess that to the Father. Would He forgive you if you confessed your sin of having an adulterous, extramarital affair with a man or a woman? If you confessed that to the Father, would He forgive the sin? Yes or no? Come on, some courage. Why, yes, He would. And He would remove that sin from you as far as the east is from the west. And you think, I'm free. But what if you were pregnant? You see? What if you got pregnant? Or what if you made someone else pregnant? That's the spin-off of David's adultery. It continued on into another generation. And it's bigger than just David's one night of passion and one moment when Uriah was killed. Many more fingers stretched out. Yes, he's forgiven. Yes, he's restored to a proper intimate relationship. But there are consequences of the sin that just don't go away. And they continue to plague David in his life, just like God promised him they would. Again, friends, sin has consequences, doesn't it? Back to verse 31. Vera, I'm taking your pill. Hall's cough drop. I never like it to hear somebody talk when he's got something rattling around in his mouth, but I'll try to keep the rattle down to a minimum. I don't want to lose my voice. Back to verse 31. David is praying. David prays that his great counselor Ahithophel will be made foolishness. His counsel will be made foolishness. And again, this is because Ahithophel is a wise man. And his counsel that he's given David over 30 years of service to David has been good and godly and wise. David knows, if anyone knows me intimately, if anyone can outsmart me, who is it? It's Ahithophel, who's walked with me for years. I need you, Father, to make his counsel bad because he knows me too well. He could bring me down. Verse 32, we see Yahweh answer David's prayer immediately. David prays for Ahithophel's counsel to become folly, and immediately somebody shows up on the scene, the answer to the prayer. In verse 32, it happened as David was coming to the summit of what? The Mount of Olives. He's come down out of the city of David into the Kidron Valley. He's going up the ascent. Now he's at the top of the Mount of Olives as David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped. That behold, and here's the man, Hushai. Hushai the Archite met him. I'm in verse 32, 2 Samuel chapter 15. Hushai the Archite met David with his coat torn and dust on his head. He was also in mourning for what was going on in his country, Israel, that David, his king, had been dethroned. David said to him, "You're the answer to my prayer." It's exactly what David says to him. If you pass over with me, you'll be a burden to me. I need you somewhere else. I need you elsewhere. Don't go. God has answered my prayer. Who would have thought it was you, Hushai? But here you are. Perfect timing at the top of the hill. As I'm praying this prayer, I look up, I get to the top of the hill, and there you are. No mistake. He says, but if you return to the city and you say to Absalom, my son, I will be your servant, O king, as I have been your father's servant in time past, so I will now be your servant. If you say that to my son Absalom, then you can thwart the counsel of Ahithophel for me. He asks for it. God immediately answers his prayer. Is God mad at David? Is God not answering David? Well, of course not. He's walking intimately with David, protecting, providing, etc., answering David's praying. Again, Ahithophel knows David's thinking. They have been partners in leading the nation of Israel for decades now. And so if anybody knows how to bring David down, if anybody knows where David will go, if anybody knows how David will strategize his exit from Jerusalem, where he will hide, it's Ahithophel. So he's a perfect adversary here. He's very dangerous to David. And God gives him Hushai. Go back and be a counselor to Absalom. Fool Absalom into thinking that you're on his side so that when you hear him speak, you can get word out to me. Find out information, send it through the high priest's son to me. That's what he says in verse 35. This is the spy in the palace. His name is Hushai. Are not Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? David continues talking to him. This is how we will get information out. The high priests are with you in Jerusalem. I know they are because I sent them back with the ark. So it shall be that whatever you hear from the king's house, Absalom, of his plans, you shall report to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. And then in verse 36, takes it to the next step. Behold, their two sons are with them there, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. They will be the heralds. They will be the messengers. Get the message to the high priest first. They will give the message to their younger sons. Their younger sons will get the message to me. By them you shall send me everything that you hear. If you come with me, you will burden me because you're much more valuable to me, because Ahithophel, trust me, knows how I think. I can't afford for this guy to give counsel. Too dangerous an adversary. Verse 37, so Hushai sees the wisdom of his King David, as I'm sure he has seen the wisdom of his King David for decades. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. David's gone, and Absalom takes his place. And Hushai is there, and Ahithophel is there. Ahithophel giving counsel. Hushai has been set up to thwart the counsel of Ahithophel, and we get to see how God would move. Reminds me of this verse right here. In Mark chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus is sending his disciples out on mission. He sends them out into a lost and dying world. He sends them into an evil and wicked and perverse generation. Anybody have any thoughts that might make you think that our generation is also evil and wicked and perverse? Yes is the answer. And as we go out into this world, what does God say? Don't go out. They're too evil. They won't listen to you. They'll shun you. They'll hate you. Is that what the Lord says? Stay home and do nothing. Say nothing. Or does he instead say, when I send you out and you go, I send you out as sheep, which you are, in the midst of wolves who want to tear you limb from limb and devour you. That's the world we live in. Jesus lives in the real world. He knows the world he was sending his men out into. How many times in Paul's writings in Corinthians, I was beaten this many times, I was shipwrecked, I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was naked, I was lashed 40 times this many times, because he went out into the midst of wolves who wanted him destroyed, killed, even stoned at Lystra. Jesus said, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be, he says, shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. But the shrewdness comes in David saying to Hushai, I need a spy in the palace. Go be my spy. You think, well, wait a minute. Didn't David just tell Hushai, go and lie to King Absalom so that you can spy for me? Isn't that what David just did? What's the answer? Yes, that's exactly what David just did. And what does God call that in this particular incident? Being as shrewd as a serpent. The Jewish midwives, the Hebrew midwives, did not take the sons of Israel in Egypt and drown them. You've got Rahab the spy who hid the two spies in her roof under the flax and lied about their position. We'll see another, I can't even think of where I was or what I'm thinking of now. When they go into the well, they cover the well, they put grain over the well. Who am I even thinking of? It was in my reading. But these things happen in the scripture, and you think, well, I thought lying was bad. It is. But you always have to weigh the greater good. There's somebody always gives that crazy, stupid thought. If a man came and banged on your door and demanded that you let him into your wife so that he could abuse her, would you allow it, or would you say she wasn't home? What do you do in that situation? You're shrewd as a serpent. You're certainly not going to open the door to the man. But you have to be innocent as doves and let God decide where right and wrong lie in that situation. What we have right here is David, as shrewd as a serpent, saying, I need a spy. Yes, you'll need to lie to become a spy, but I need a spy in the castle so that maybe I can get back to that castle, that palace, and rule Israel again properly. My son Absalom will not rule it properly. We move into 2 Samuel chapter 16. Remember, in the original Bible, there were no breaks. When God gave this word through Moses and Samuel and all the other writers of the scripture, all capital letters, all jammed together. In the Hebrew Bible, do you know that there weren't even any vowels? So the word David would be DVD. There was no A and no I. There were no vowels in the original Hebrew script. It was just all consonants. I could go into that, but I won't. But it's a much different writing than we have now. So this chapter break of chapter 16 was made by scribes. Somewhere along the line, somebody was saying, you know what, the story ends here. David's out of the city. Absalom is in the city. The topic changes, so let's make this a new chapter. But God didn't do this. A scribe did this. Just know that. So we can move right on into chapter 16. The story continues, and we see Mephibosheth. Remember his name? We see Mephibosheth betray David. Or do we? I'll let you decide. Remember who Mephibosheth is? He is King Saul's son's son. He's King Saul's son Jonathan. He's Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, who was crippled in his feet in an accident. Just let me show you. This man will be the focus of this chapter. I want to show you a couple of these verses from the past. Who is Mephibosheth and why is he important in the story of David? Listen to what's going on. David has been king for 35 years. Who did he take the throne from? Who was king before him? It was King Saul. And Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. Mephibosheth is a Benjamite. Now, if you happen to be a Benjamite and you saw the king of Judah having problems in his throne, you might say, ha! It's exactly, I love this. Maybe God will now put another Benjamite on the throne. And you know what? Maybe it'll be me. I'm the grandson of Saul. Maybe I can have the throne. Maybe that's what God is doing here. Maybe after 35 years of my grandfather Saul being off of the altar, maybe it's my turn. I don't believe that, but that's what Mephibosheth's servant will feed David. He'll tell him exactly that's Mephibosheth's thoughts. Maybe the throne is going to go back to the house of Saul. In 2 Samuel 4:4, Mephibosheth is introduced. Let's just look at a few verses so we know who this chapter is about. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the report of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel that they had been killed in the Jezreel valley, that King Saul and his son, the heir apparent, the heir to the throne, Jonathan, both had been killed in battle against the Philistines. Word gets back to where this young boy Mephibosheth is, so his nurse takes him and tries to flee there, so the Philistines don't come down and attack him there and kill everybody that was associated with Saul's family. It says the nurse took him up and fled to protect him. Good nurse. She did what she should have done. But it happened that in her hurry to flee, he fell and became lame. So he was now crippled in his feet. This man Mephibosheth. It says, and his name was Mephibosheth. When you go down 5 more chapters, look at the shift here. I'm in 2 Samuel 4. I'm moving to 2 Samuel 9. When you get to 2 Samuel 9, it says, Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, who is now king. And he fell on his face and he prostrated himself. Humility. He falls down, face down in front of his king, King David. And David said, Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth said, here is your servant. I'm at your service, sire. What would you like me to do? And David said to him in verse 7, do not fear. I'm sure you're wondering why I would bring Saul's only living grandson into the palace. I mean you no harm. As a matter of fact, I've called for you so I could show you kindness, because I made a promise to your father, Jonathan, who was the best friend a man could ever have. And in keeping the promise to my friend Jonathan, I have summoned you. You, son, have no reason to fear. For I will surely show kindness to you for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land of your grandfather Saul, and you shall eat at my table regularly. From a crippled guy, who knows how he was living all these years, all of a sudden to be told by King David, I'll dress you in royal robes. You'll be at the king's table eating with me regularly. What a change of plans. And all of a sudden I become an impresario overnight. I have probably tens of thousands of acres of land. I'm a rich man, just like that, because of the kindness of David toward my dead father, who's been dead for a long time now. Not too long. Verse 9, the king called Saul's servant, Ziba. And the king says to him, now you say, wait a minute. Well, this is man to man. I make a contract with Steve or Larry or anybody else. Terry, I don't call anybody else into the room unless I want them to be a witness. But otherwise, men take care of business man to man. And David is speaking to Mephibosheth. Why does David introduce Ziba here? Who's this guy? Why does he need him to be part of the contract? What's the answer? It's because he's just given Mephibosheth land and holdings that he cannot control on his own. He's a crippled man. So he's got to call the servant in. You do this for Jonathan's son Mephibosheth. That's what this is about. So the king called Saul's servant Ziba, and he said to him, all that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson Mephibosheth. And I can still see Ziba saying, okay, what does that have to do with me? I don't hear my name in any of this. The next verse, he says, David to Ziba, the servant, you, Ziba, and your sons and your servants shall cultivate the land for him. He's unable to do it. He's a crippled man. He's never learned these things. He was crippled as a boy. He's never been out in the field. He's never walked behind donkeys. He's never done the work of farming and cultivation and reaping and sowing. He doesn't know these things, but you do. And I'm putting his holdings in your charge. You and your sons and your servants do this for him. He's the boss. But you take care of these things for him. You shall bring in the produce so that your master's grandson Mephibosheth may have food. Nevertheless, Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall eat at my table regularly. Yes, he will eat in his own house, but he will also very regularly be a guest at the king's table. And then it says, now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. So you've got 35 people plus Ziba who are now in charge of this vast holdings that David has just given Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson. So that's who he is. That's the situation. Now shift your brains back for 5 minutes with me. David is fleeing Jerusalem. He's gone out of the city of David into the Kidron Valley up to the Mount of Ascent, the Mount of Olives. There he has met with Hushai, who he sends back to the palace, fool Absalom into thinking you're on his side so you can be my spy. And now Ziba shows up on the path. Verse 1, when David had passed a little beyond the summit, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of saddled donkeys. And on the donkeys were 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a jug of wine. Let's not forget the Jewish traditions now, and a jug of wine. So Ziba shows up as David is leaving Jerusalem with these donkeys that are heavy laden with provisions, food. The question is, hey, where's Mephibosheth? You're his servant, but why didn't you bring your master? If your master said, let's do this for David, then you would have put him in a chariot, a carriage, something. You would have gotten him here, but he's not here. It's just you. The question, this nagging question, Ziba, you're nothing but a servant in a man's house. Why are you the one bringing this gift? Where is Mephibosheth? The king said to Ziba in verse 2, why do you have these? And Ziba said, well, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride. Far be it from a royal son or daughter of King David to walk. I've brought the donkeys so your family can ride, not walk. The bread and the summer fruit for the young men to eat. And the wine for whoever is faint in the wilderness to drink. Let's remember that wine in the day, in the heat of Israel, a traveler could easily get faint and pass out. Wine was medicinal. Among other things, it was ceremonial. It was deeply in the worship service. Every sacred offering, be it a burnt offering, a sin offering, a peace offering, a thanksgiving offering, a wave offering, a heave offering, a grain offering, all the offerings were given with a hin or a portion of a hin of wine poured out onto. So wine was very much part of God's economy here, but it was also a medicine. And so when people got faint, give them a little bit of the wine. The king said, Okay, I get it. Where's your master's son? Where's Mephibosheth? Ziba said to the king, and here's what you get to decide. Is this true or is this a lie? Behold, he is staying in Jerusalem. There's a reason why. And here's the reason. Because he thinks and said, I heard him say it, today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me. The tribe of Judah will no longer be the kings. David is finally being washed out by God. The tribe of Benjamin will stand as the kings again. From the great Saul to his son Jonathan, and now me, Mephibosheth, I will be king again in Jerusalem. That's what Ziba tells David Mephibosheth said. Because God now is restoring the kingdom to my father, the kingdom of my father to me. The house of Benjamin will take over again. I don't think that's true. You can think what you want. We're not going to split the church over it. But I don't believe that's true. When we get to chapter 19, we'll see Mephibosheth come on the scene and say, what Ziba told you was a lie. I wanted to go. He left before me, before I could go. This was all made up by him, and we'll see that later. So both Ziba, the servant, and Mephibosheth both speak to this. If you're judging a courtroom, you got to look them in the eye and think, who's the one that's telling me the truth? Who's telling me a lie? Who can I believe? And we'll see by the end of the story that I think in David's heart, he believed Mephibosheth because of what he did later in the chapters. But this won't be good for Mephibosheth. David right now believes what Ziba is saying. So the king said to Ziba, behold, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. Now think, like I just said a few minutes ago, of the worst days of David's life. This is one of them. Only David can number them and order them, but this is one of them. He's got a lot on his mind. It's been 20 years since he's shown kindness to Mephibosheth. Apparently, Ziba has been faithful to the arrangement to you and your sons and your servants. Keep the fields for him, cultivate the land. Apparently, Ziba has done a good job of doing that. David knows it. Ziba has come without Mephibosheth. He says Mephibosheth has in his head his own little revolt planned or whatever. I got too much on my mind to deal with this too long. You know what? Okay, what you say is true. What Mephibosheth has, I'm giving to you. That's all the time I have for this. Again, one of the worst days of my life, man. I don't have a lot of energy for this. So he believes it. And I can see under this duress, he's not going to call witnesses. He's not going to call. Did you hear Mephibosheth say this? He doesn't have time to be a judge and to find out what the truth is. He doesn't have the luxury to send for Mephibosheth and hear out of his own mouth. He's on his way fleeing Jerusalem so that Absalom doesn't come and kill them all. And so he believes him. And he says, behold, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. And Ziba said, I prostrate myself. I bow down to you, king. Let me find favor in your sight, O Lord, O my Lord the king. So again, he didn't have any reason to believe that Ziba was lying. He didn't have the luxury of investigating. He's fleeing Jerusalem. If this is true, and maybe it is, take what he's got. Let God deal with it later. It's a very interesting turn here about Mephibosheth. We'll see the rest of the story when we come back next week. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly